Okay, this lesson is called Proving Lines Parallel, and we see this word converse here. And do you remember what converse means from earlier in the year when we were talking about that? That's when it flip-flopped the statement. The if became the then became the if, the hypothesis and conclusion switched. So the other day we talked about if we have parallel lines and those parallel lines are cut by a transversal, then your alternate interior angles would be congruent, your alternate exterior would be congruent, your corresponding would be congruent, your same side interior would be supplementary, and your same side exterior would be supplementary. So that was if we had two parallel lines cut by a transversal, that's what would happen. Today I'm flipping that statement around, and it says that if you have corresponding angles congruent, then the lines would be parallel. If you have alternate interior or alternate exterior angles that are congruent, then those two lines will be parallel. And the third one is if you have same side interior or same side exterior angles that are supplementary, then the two lines will be parallel. So the other day we were saying we do have parallel lines, and this and this and this is a result of that. Today we're flip-flopping the statement, and we're saying that if the corresponding angles are congruent, then we can say the lines are parallel. If alternate interior or alternate exterior are congruent, then the lines are parallel. And if same side interior or same side exterior are supplementary, then the lines are parallel. So it's almost like last class, but today I don't know if the lines are parallel unless one of these three things happens. Okay. So the first example, it wants to know, are lines L and M parallel? So if I can show corresponding angles congruent, then I'm going to know that the lines are parallel. If I can show alternate interior or alternate exterior angles congruent, then I'll know the lines are parallel. Or if I can show same side interior or same side exterior angles are supplementary, then I'll know the lines are parallel. So let's look at this for a second. What kind of angles are the 70 and 73? These are same side interior angles. And are these supplementary? No, these two angles do not add to be 180. So since my same side interior angles are not supplementary, then the answer is no. These lines are not parallel. But I can go ahead and find X, Y, and Z based off of information I learned in the past. I know that vertical angles are always congruent whether the lines are parallel or not. So I know that Z will be 70 because vertical angles are always congruent. I know that I have a straight line right here, so I know that these two angles add to be 180 degrees, so X would be 110. And I know I have a straight line right here, so I know that these two will add to be 180, whether the lines are parallel or not. And if I take 73 away from 180, that makes Y 107. So I'm still able to find X, Y, and Z just based off of vertical angles and the linear pairs that we learned in the first unit. Okay, next one. I want to figure out if these lines are parallel. So let's just go with some things that we can do without knowing. I know that this is a straight line, so these two angles are going to add to be 180. So what does that make Y? 130. I know that X and Y are vertical, and vertical angles are always congruent, so that means that X is also 130. And then I know that I have a straight line right here, so I know that these two will add to be 180, so I know that Z is 50. So this is all stuff I learned in the past. Now I want to see if the lines are parallel, and the lines will be parallel if the corresponding angles are congruent, if alternate interior and exterior are congruent, and if same side interior and same side exterior are supplementary. So let's look. These right here, what kind of angles are those? Corresponding, are they congruent? Yep, so I'm good there. What kind of angles are the Y and the 130? Alternate interior, are those congruent? Yep, so I'm good there. What kind of angles are the Y and Z? Same side interior, are those supplementary? Yep, so that means yes, these lines are parallel. So I can prove the lines parallel if my corresponding angles are congruent, if my alternate interior angles are congruent, and if my same side interior angles are supplementary. If your same side interior angles are not supplementary, then the lines are not parallel. Okay, next section. It says determine the value of x for which line L will be parallel to line M. So I want these lines to be parallel. So in order for these lines to be parallel, one of these three things has to be true. The corresponding angles have to be congruent, alternate interior, exterior congruent, same side interior, same side exterior supplementary. So the first thing I want you to do is look at the angles they show you and ask yourself, do you have a name for these angles? What do we call these? These are corresponding angles. Okay, do I want my corresponding angles to be congruent, or do I want my corresponding angles to be supplementary? Congruent. I want my corresponding angles to be congruent. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to set them equal to each other. So I set 55 equal to the x plus 25. And then I just solve that equation. So to move a positive 25, I'm going to subtract it. And if I do that, the x drops, the equals drops. 55 minus 25 makes 30. And if x is 30, then this would be 55 degrees. This would be 55 degrees. I'd have corresponding angles being congruent. And if the corresponding angles are congruent, then I know that line L is parallel to line M. So that's what I need. I need x to be a 30 in order for those lines to be parallel. Okay, number 2. First thing I want you to look for is, do you know a name for the angles shown? And I'm going to turn my picture. What do we call these angles right here? Alternate interior angles. They're inside the lines we want to be parallel, and they're on opposite sides of the transversal. So these are alternate interior angles. Okay, if I want the lines parallel, do I want my alternate interior angles to be congruent, or do I want my alternate interior to be supplementary? I want my alternate interior to be congruent. Okay, so I'm going to set them equal. So I want 2x minus 5 to equal 95. And now I'm going to solve that. So to move the minus 5, I do the opposite. I add it. That makes 2x equals 100. And what do you get if you divide? 50. And that's what I need x to be. If x was a 50, this would be 95 degrees, this would be 95 degrees. My alternate interior angles would be congruent, and then that would make the lines parallel. So it's basically like what we were doing the other day, except the other day I knew the lines were parallel. Today, I'm trying to figure out if they are parallel. Okay, number 3. First thing I do is I try to ask myself, do I know a name for the angles shown? Yes, these are alternate exterior angles. Okay, do we want alternate exterior angles to be congruent, or do we want them to be supplementary? We want them to be congruent. And if you can't remember, you go back and you look on your front page. So I'm going to set them equal. I'm going to set 3x minus 33 equal to 2x plus 26. And then I'm just going to solve that equation. When x's are on opposite sides, I need to move one of them. I'm going to move my 2x by doing the opposite and subtract it. 3x minus 2x is 1x. The minus 33 drops. The equals drops. That goes away. The 26 drops. And then I'm going to make the minus 33 go away by doing the opposite and add it to both sides. The x drops. The equals drops. And what do you get if you add 26 and 33? 59. So if x is a 59, then these two angles would be congruent, and that would make line L and M parallel. Okay, number 4. I'm going to go ahead and turn my picture. Do we have a special name for these two angles shown? We do not. These are not corresponding. They're not alternate interior. They're not same side interior. They're not alternate exterior. They're not same side exterior. I do not have a special name for these. So I have to do this problem a little bit differently, and I have 2 choices. So I have to work with stuff that I'm allowed to do. I know that these 2 angles are vertical angles, and they're always congruent no matter what, whether lines are parallel or not. So if this is 105, I know this one's 105. Another thing I know is that this is a straight line, and I know that these 2 angles will add to be 180. So what would this one be? 75. Okay, now that I have done that, then I have a choice. Do I know a name for these 2 guys? Those are alternate interior angles. So would I want them congruent or supplementary? Congruent. So I could set these equal and solve my equation. My other choice is, do I know a name for these 2 angles right here? Those are same side interior angles. Would I want them congruent or supplementary? Supplementary. I would want these 2 to add together to equal 180. So do you want me to add these to equal 180, or do you want me to set these 2 equal because they're alternate interior angles? What do you think's easier? Let's set these 2 equal because they're alternate interior angles. I think that would be simpler. So I would set 75 equal to 3x minus 18, and then I would just solve that equation. My other option, and I'm just going to write it down, is that these 2 are same side interior, so they'd be supplementary. So my other equation would be 105 plus 3x minus 18 equals 180. It doesn't matter which equation you solve, you'd get the same answer either way. Okay, so I'm going to solve this one because it looks simpler. So to remove a minus 18, I have to do the opposite and add 18. The 3x would drop, the equals would drop, and then what do you get if you add 75 plus 18? 93, and then I would need to divide both sides by 3, and what do you get if you do that? 31, and there's my answer. Okay, number 5. First thing I want to know is, do I have a special name for these angles shown? Nope. So I have to move something. So what can I do? I know that these are vertical angles, and vertical angles always equal. So I can move my 2x right here. Now this time I really can't do anything with this because this isn't just a number. So now that I've moved it, do I know a name for these 2 angles shown? Yes, those are same side interior angles. Do I want these to be congruent, or do I want them to be supplementary? I want them to be supplementary. Same side, supplementary. Same side, supplementary. So 2x plus x plus 30 equals 180. And that's the equation I would solve. I'm not going to do it because I think most of you know how to do it, and hopefully it doesn't bother you that I'm not. Okay, let's move to 6. Number 6. First thing I want to do is look to see, do I have a special name for these 2 angles? Nope. So I need to move something. And I have a couple choices. I have a couple things I could do. So let's see here. I could move the 3x here because those are vertical angles, so I could do that. Or I could move the 5x here because those are vertical angles. So it really doesn't matter what I do. I'm going to move the 5x here. And now, do you know a name for those guys? Those are same side interior angles again. And so, do I want them to be congruent or supplementary? Supplementary, same side, supplementary. So I add them together to equal 180, and that's the equation I would solve. I'm just not gonna. Okay, let's move to the next page. All right. This next section is sometimes confusing to students because there's just so much information on the page here. So it says, using the given information, which lines, if any, can you conclude are parallel? Okay, so number 1 tells me that angle 2 is supplementary to angle 3. So let me look at angle 2 and angle 3. Here they are right here, angle 2 and angle 3. If these two angles are supplementary, do we think any lines would be parallel because of it? And if so, which lines? And the answer is yes. Line A would be parallel to line B. So let me show you. I'm going to draw my parallel lines here in blue. And I'm going to draw this one in red. This would be the transversal. And I'm going to cover up all this. Do you see how 2 and 3 are up against the transversal? They're on the same side of the transversal. They're inside those parallel lines there. And because they add to be 180, then the same side interior are supplementary, which means that lines A and B would be parallel. Okay. Number 2 says angle 6 is supplementary to angle 7. So if these two angles are supplementary, if these two add to be 180, do you think we could say anything here is parallel? Yep, we can say the same thing, that line A is parallel to line B. If I look at A and B being parallel, then 6 and 7 are inside of them. They're on the same side of the transversal, so these would be same side interior angles, and if they're supplementary, same side supplementary, then yes, those lines would be parallel. Okay, let's look at number 3. Number 3 says angle 5 is congruent to angle 10. Okay, so now this is a little different. So I need to find the transversal. What are 5 and 10 both up against? They're up against which line? And I'm going to turn my page. 5 and 10 are both up against this line right here. So that means this line I'm coloring must be the transversal when I'm talking about angles 5 and 10. So if this line's the transversal, then these would be the lines that I'd be interested in being parallel. So let's see. It says that 5 and 10 are congruent. So 5 and 10, if I look at the picture this way, 5 and 10 are inside these lines, and they're on opposite sides of my purple transversal, so these would be alternate interior angles, and if these are congruent, then yep, these lines right here would be parallel. So lines L and M would be the parallel lines this time. Okay, so L would be parallel to M. Okay, next one's up are 9 and 12. It tells me that angle 9 is congruent to angle 12. Well, that's true because they're vertical angles, and vertical angles are always congruent, whether these lines are parallel or whether these lines are parallel. So just the fact that vertical angles are congruent, that's not enough information to know whether these lines are parallel. So I do not have enough information, so I'm going to say not enough info. There's not enough information to determine whether the lines are parallel. So just because vertical angles are congruent doesn't mean lines are parallel. In order for lines to be parallel, I have to know that the corresponding angles are congruent, the alternate interior or exterior are congruent, or same side interior, same side exterior are supplementary. If they tell you something else, you don't have enough information. Okay, 5 says that angle 2 is congruent to angle 10. Okay, so first of all, what transversal are both of those angles up against? They're up against my purple transversal. So I'm going to turn my picture this way. So 2 and 10 are both up against the purple transversal. What kind of angles are 2 and 10? Those are corresponding angles. If my corresponding angles are congruent, would these lines be parallel? Yes, they would. So L and M are parallel if 2 and 10 are congruent. Okay, number 6 says that angle 11 is congruent to angle 7. Do we have a special name for those two angles? Those are nothing that we've talked about. So the fact that these are congruent doesn't give me enough information to do anything. So I'm going to say not enough information. Okay, and then number 7 says that angle 1 is congruent to angle 3. if these two angles are congruent, would I have parallel lines? First of all, what transversal are 1 and 3 up against? They're up against this red transversal right here. So that means these would be the lines that could possibly be parallel. So what kind of angles are 1 and 3? Corresponding. And if my corresponding angles are congruent, would these lines be parallel? Yes, they would. And that would make line A parallel to line B. Okay, this bottom section is just review. So let's see here. I want to go over number 3, just because number 3 sometimes confuses people. So number 3 here, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to draw my parallel lines in blue. And I'm going to draw this transversal that cuts through them in red. And I'm going to ignore that part of my picture. What kind of angles are the X and the 60? Those are alternate interior angles. And alternate interior angles are congruent. So X would be 60. Okay, this time I'm going to draw this transversal that cuts through my 2 blue parallel lines, and I'm going to cover up everything but the Z and the 80. What kind of angles are the Z and the 80? These are alternate interior angles, and alternate interior angles are always congruent. So Z would be 80 as well. And then I have 2 ways I can find Y. So one way I can find Y is knowing that this is a straight line. So how much do these 3 angles add up to be? 180. So 60 and 80 makes 140. So what would Y have to be? 40. The other way I can figure out what Y is knowing that when you have a triangle, that your 3 angles inside of a triangle add to be 180 degrees. So these 3 angles would have to add to be 180 if they're in a triangle. And do those 3 angles all add to be 180? They sure do. Okay, I'm not going to do all of these here, but I just want to look at number 4, and then I think I'll backtrack to 1. So number 4, if I extend my parallel lines in blue, and I draw the transversal that cuts through them in red, do you know what kind of angles these 2 angles are? They're same side interior angles. So do I want them congruent or supplementary? Supplementary. I want them to add to be 180. So 7x minus 16 plus 5x plus 5 equals 180, etc. That's the angle, or that's the equation you would solve. I'm just not going to do it. Okay, and then I want to go back to number 1. Number 1, these lines are parallel and these lines are parallel. So first, I'm going to think about these guys being parallel. And the one cutting through them, the transversal. I'm going to cover that up. What do you know about the X and the 110? They're same side interior angles. So X would be 70. Same side supplementary, same side supplementary. Okay, this time, because I know these lines are also parallel, this time I'm going to draw my parallel lines in purple. And this is the transversal that cuts through my purple parallel lines. And I'm going to cover that up. What do you know about these 2 angles? They're same side interior angles. And same side supplementary, same side supplementary. So Y here would be 110. Okay, hopefully that you understand. And that's all for now. Smiley face. Thank you.